There is something strangely reassuring about the newspaper, about its tangibility as a material object. It stands as a testament to the stability of the modern world, in defiance of the vagaries of daily events. It ties together disjointed and contingent facts in neat, assured narrative arcs that find themselves reified in ink on the page, for everyone to unfold or to crease, and to discard at the end of the day in the assurance that history has been consumed, processed, and solidified. Like the verb of the biblical God, the newspaper's function is to beget light where there is otherwise none. Publications that have come to acquire a reputation for the quality of their reporting are known as newspapers of record, their authoritative take on current affairs grounded in their professed independence from state ideology. But as the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek frequently points out, claims of independence from ideology should always be viewed with the healthy suspicion that the space we find ourselves in may in fact be the most ideological of all. And this is perhaps best exemplified by the broadsheet newspaper, with its wide front page allowing for multiple headlines above the fold, with its formal tone and its narrow columns exploring a variety of topics in depth. The broadsheet has come to be associated with intellectuality and seriousness, and indeed, to this day, newspapers of record often retain the broadsheet format. Paradoxically, however, its large size suggests that the broadsheet is meant less to be read than it is to be displayed. Whereas it purports to explore national and international issues with all the detachment and thoroughness of journalistic objectivity, its inherent unwieldiness reduces its function to that of a mere accessory. Far from being independent from the state apparatus, state ideology is already so deeply ingrained in the broadsheet, so cemented in its audience, that the very act of reading is rendered unnecessary. The broadsheet is designed to be folded, carried in the hand or under the arm, a mere accessory in the panoply of the Marxian character mask of the banker, the bourgeois or the yuppie. Often paired up with an umbrella to prevent it from dissolving in the rain, and thus monopolizing both upper limbs, the broadsheet as a cultural artefact is emblematic of a certain detachment from manual labor. It is a status symbol of choice for the white-collar worker who carries himself with all the assurance and security implicit to his place in the established system. But more than just part of a costume, the broadsheet is also a mask in and of itself. Its proclaimed independence is an illusion, rendered possible only because its ideological stance is in alignment with that of the dominant powers. The relationship is mutually beneficial, almost transparently so. Mainstream news agencies tacitly endorse a free market economy from which they fully benefit, and an implicit and necessary condition for the state commitment to freedom of the press is that this freedom be given away the very moment it is granted. However, as Zizek would likely point out, the mask here is no longer intended to hide. In a postmodern, post-naive political and social world, what was once a pathological fissure between the ontological and the theological, between what the newspaper purported to be and what it strived to achieve, has now been reduced to a blurry line. The mask is not one designed to perpetuate a false consciousness, but rather it is that of cynicism. From editors, journalists and columnists to their intended audience, all the actors involved are aware of the tacit ideological alignment of press and state, of the broadsheet's mere pretense of detachment and objectivity, yet they defiantly proclaim its independence and freedom. If they choose to retain the mask, it is less so as to deceive, rather than because they find themselves united in the mask. In a shifting media landscape, where the digital is rapidly superseding the printed word, a plurality of meanings is emerging from the void that was once filled by the tangibility of the material object. Whereas the newspaper once preferred to map the current state of the world in all its unruly variety is now competing for its place on the online map. The broadsheet under late-stage capitalism consequently functions as a mirror image of the digital space. Its views have become increasingly polarized, and for it to make itself readable again, its size has shrunk. But whereas an increasing number of reputable publications are now turning to the tabloid format, with its shock headlines and hyperbolic statements, the reflected image they offer has been rendered harmless and sterile. On the printed page, fulmination and dissent find themselves transubstantiated into insipidness. And it is in this very context that we now see how cynicism asserts itself. Right and left-wing papers wage inconsequential battles in which reciprocal accusations of bias underpin unconvinced and unconvincing claims of exclusive access to facts and objectivity. But the so-called culture wars reflect less a profoundly divided world than an homogeneous one. Indeed, the division is entirely manufactured, and the ruling ideology is the main beneficiary of an increasingly narrow political landscape in which radically dissident voices rarely feature, if at all. The subterfuge here is an old one: divide and rule, a mere diversion tactic in which two pseudo-opposite views are artificially bolstered in order to greatly limit the ideological horizon of possibilities. As far as the broadsheet is concerned, and its move towards the tabloid format, the tactic seems doomed to failure, however. Its days as a material object are numbered. The battleground the broadsheet competes on is primarily technological rather than ideological, and the only thing that remains to prop it up is a certain sense of nostalgia, relegating it to a space shared with vinyl records and fountain pens. We stand witness to its agonal gasps before it is left to gather dust on the shelves of a curio cabinet.